So good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be part of the program of this year's edition of the NGI Policy Summit. In our workshop today, we are going to talk about privacy and trust, but with those aspects in the context of EU-US collaboration. And we are going to do so straight from the horse's mouth by giving the floor to those universities, laboratories, and companies that are running experiments in different fields, relying on different platforms to tackle specific privacy and trust issues in collaboration with counterparts in the US. We really hope that this webinar will stimulate your minds and to think about your US colleagues and to think of how to engage with them and instill new partnerships to establish new collaboration and apply for the upcoming calls. So from January this year and through June 22, NGI-Atlantic will fund EU-based researchers and innovators and carry out NGI-related experiments with the US research teams. There will be 5 open calls in total, and the second one is closing in 2 days, so on the 30th of September. Funding projects from 50,000 to 150,000 euros. For a total of 2.8 million of funding to European organizations, and a series of events and webinars, mainly, of course, virtual webinars, is guiding the applicants through the core themes and priorities and details. The first call closed on the 29th of May this year, and we got 21 proposals from 14 countries in Europe, with 21 organizations participating from the US. 6 of these 21 projects have been selected to carry out research and innovation activities in collaboration with their US counterparts on NGI experimental platforms for a total funding of 726 euros. 3 of them are going to present today with us. The first group that we have the honor to have with us is represented by the University of Athens, Department of Economics and Business, and the University of Memphis. And they are presenting their experiments on self-certifying names for names data networking and how using this scheme, content names becomes more decentralized, over independent and self-certifying. And we will have George Polizos with us today. Then we'll give the floor to Trace Labs, and Thomas Levak will present their project, their experiment on privacy and trust applied to the food data marketplace for sustainable supply chains. This is going to be run in collaboration with Coxi from the US. And last but not least, we will give the floor to the colleagues at the Sorbonne University for their cash experiment on content delivery network, which is run in collaboration with the New York Tandon School and the US Ignite. So I'm giving now the floor to Jim Clark, the coordinator of the NGI-Atlantic.eu project, to give you a 2-minute overview of the collaboration between EU and US in the field of the next generation internet.
Thank you.
Jim, I can take the sharing if it's fine on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
And welcome to everyone to the workshop. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview on how we got here. So as most things in the European programs, these things take a bit of time. So going back to 2013 to 2014, There was a series of EU-US workshops jointly organized by the Genie and Fed for Fire teams, and with their sponsors, the US NSF and DG Connect of the European Commission. And that led to a program, ICT 11 2014 for Fire Plus, which was specifically to fund a coordination support action for international collaboration. Now, it wasn't just for the US, but EU-US was obviously a very main focus of this. So this was able to bring a number of other workshops were held in the period following this, and it led to a situation where the US testbeds could be asked to join the open calls of fire projects, either for experiments or for linking facilities, where each side would fund its own part and NGIAT would provide the link. So this was quite a good starting point. Then in 2017, right around the time that FIRE was changing over to NGI initiative, the DG Connect and NSF established a EU-US committee, specifically bringing together researchers and policymakers from both sides of the Atlantic to look at how they could jointly develop research-focused networking test beds and identify joint research opportunities. Two subcommittees were formed focusing on next-generation internet and advanced wireless platforms. And there was a workshop held in Brussels in June 2017, and it was co-located with the Net Futures Conference, which included a dedicated session on EU-US in June of 2017. Now, this then led on to the work program ICT 31 2018-2019, specifically on EU-US collaboration on NGI, being published in October of 2017. And the link is there. So this ICT 31 2018 was the first part, which was resulted in two coordination support action projects, Think Nexus, EU-US think tank on NGI, who had the session just before our session, and NGI Explorers, which is funding EU-US fellowships for EU members to go to US institutions in topics related to NGI. And then the second part of that call in 2019 resulted in the NGIAtlantic.eu project to catapult these earlier international cooperation activities to move from the workshop mode into the actual experimental mode. In parallel with that, in 2018, the US NSF funded a dedicated program on US-EU collaboration entitled Internet Core and Edge Technologies ICT for US investigators to carry out collaborative research with EU investigators on Internet technologies and advanced wireless networking. And this resulted in 8 large-scale projects over 3 years duration at $300,000 funding, and 5 research collaboration initiation projects, 1 year duration and $100,000. So this program is still running. It started a little bit early for NGIAtlantic.eu, and the European Commission are in discussions with the US NSF on a follow-up to this program. Next slide, please. Now I'll just give a few words about the project itself. So the key features of the project are that we're having 5 open calls over the 30-month duration of the project. And that we're now finishing up our second open call. As Sarah mentioned, it's closing on the 30th of September. We have 2.8 million euros out of the total budget of 3.5 million specifically dedicated to the open call projects, which is 80% of the overall budget to fund the the NGI experiments. We have an external advisory group from members on both sides of the Atlantic who help us to advise on the open call topics and the priorities. We have an external pool of evaluators, which are independent completely from the project, who run the evaluations of the submitted applications. And we have an online platform called the Twinning Lab, which I'll go into in a bit more detail in a moment. And we have a continuous coaching and mentoring program, which runs all the way from the pre-proposal stage right the way until after the funded projects are finished. Next slide, please. So the open calls provide cascade funding to the EU researchers and innovators in carrying out the experiments with the US research teams. And the first three topics that we prioritized were privacy and trust enhancing technologies, decentralized data governance, and discovery and identification technologies. The reason we prioritize these is because in the ICT program from 2018 that funded the RIA, the Research and Innovation Action projects, were in these three topics. So they've been holding their open calls over the last 1.5 years, and there's results coming out of those projects, which are ready for experimentation with the excellent teams over in the US. Of course, we are open to new entrants as well. We're not, just open for the ones that were already funded. Anyone that's involved in any of these three topics can pitch with a U.S. partner. Then we also have a continuous call for external evaluators, which are very welcome to join as well. Obviously, if you're going in as an open call project, you wouldn't want to be going in also as an EPE member and vice versa. But this is something, if you're interested in evaluating on the projects, we run kind of a similar remuneration to the H2020 evaluation schemes. So if you have a strong expertise in the NGI topics, you can apply to this. Just some insights on the first open call. It was quite balanced in terms of the coverage areas of those three topics, where we had 8, 7, and 6 across privacy enhancing and trust enhancing, decentralized data governance, and the discovery and identification technologies. And a couple of them actually had crossed over into more than one of the topics, which was fine. Then in terms of the EU proposers, there was more SMEs, which was actually a key KPI from the EU side. They're really trying to reach out to those that don't participate as much in the H2020 program. So having the smaller new entrants coming in is quite desired. On the US side, it was more on the research academic side, mainly because of the way that the funding in the US is mainly for the research and academic side. So that again was to be expected. Okay. The second open call, just some details on that. So as we mentioned, the call is closing in 2 days' time. The evaluation will take place in October 2020. The indicative expected start dates is the 1st of January 2021. And of course, we're keeping a close eye on the COVID-19 situation as well. And we can be somewhat flexible on that. And there's 2 types of proposals that could be funded under the open calls. There's what we call the long-term or LT proposals with a maximum duration of 6 months and the monitoring frequency on a monthly basis, and the funding range of $50,000 to $150,000. Then the short-term are maximum duration of 3 months with a fortnightly monitoring frequency and a funding range of $25,000 to $75,000. In the second open call, we have a focus on the experimental platforms, and the types of experimental platforms that we're talking about here are on the EU side would be the Fed for Fire plus 5G PPP. Then on the US side, you have both the wired and wireless funded programs such as Enter, Genie, Fabric, and the Future Cloud platform. And then on the wireless side, the platforms for advanced wireless research and US Ignite. And then, as I mentioned before, the dedicated US-EU ICT program, which still has some projects running, and they're signing up to our twinning lab to become involved in our open calls. In the second open call, we have two streams, and the first priority or first stream is on the EU-US experimental platforms interconnection. So this would enable established designers and facility providers of the types of experimental infrastructures that I just mentioned, test beds and platforms on both sides of the Atlantic, to interconnect with each other, to offer their facilities on a continuous basis to the community of experimenters and application developers and other NGI topics. Then the second part of the call is again similar to the first open call, because the results, as I mentioned before, of those earlier research and innovation action projects are available now, whereas the new projects that just started at the same time as ours will not have results until 2021. So again, we decided to focus on the same three topics: privacy, trust, and technologies, decentralized data governance, and discovery and identification technologies. The Twinning Lab is an online platform that we have to help matchmaking, so where researchers and innovators and startups from the EU and US can come together to discover and connect with the transatlantic actors and establish complementary partnerships. And we're happy to say that in our first open call, that this has resulted in a number of applicants coming together successfully, and they were able to join up and put in an application together.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you all. And yeah, I think now it's time to give the floor to our speakers. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll give the floor to George Politsos, Director at the Mobile Multimedia Laboratory of the University of Athens.
Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Hi, George. Yes.
Great. So I'll share my screen. Okay, good. So I and my team are happy to be part of NGI-Atlantic.eu. I'm with the Athens University of Economics and Business, and I lead the Mobile Multimedia Lab. And we applied as a team with Professor Christos Papadopoulos, who is at the University of Memphis. And this is our team. And the idea is to develop an idea and evaluate it and do experiments on the named data networking testbed. And I'll give you some background because it's interesting. Essentially, before NGI, we used the term future internet about, 12 years ago. And at that time, there was a global effort for architecture for the future internet. We traced back, it started with ideas a long time ago, but a key point in this history was a talk by Van Jacobson, then at the Xerox PARC, and he gave a talk at Google Tech on what he called content-centric networking. And we were not really aware of the particular talk at that time, but later on we proposed and started projects what became known as information-centric networking. And a little bit later, essentially, CCN got funding from the National Science Foundation in the US under the title Named Data Networking. So there were a number of efforts around that time that many of them started with clean slate architectures. Let's redesign the internet from scratch now that we have all this experience and try to address many of the problems of it that we know. But of course, we realized from the beginning that the internet is big and has inertia. And so we, from the beginning, started to look at ways of evolving the internet rather than changing it from scratch. And one of the most pervasive efforts that remained and is strong until these days is named data networking. What is interesting is that these efforts, as I said, were global, but key points, key efforts were from the two sides of the Atlantic, mostly the US and the EU. So NDN started at Xerox PARC, continued with NSF funding with Lixia Zhang as the PI from UCLA, leading a consortium of many US universities. And then on the EU side, actually preceding the NSF funding were various EU proposals, projects. A couple of those we participated in, and we all came together and discussed things and came up with the term ICN, information-centric networking, to describe the overall approach. And my group actually made a big effort, and we had a key survey paper called the Survey of Information-Centric Networking Research that essentially described the various approaches in ICN. Another interesting data point here is a project, a support action by the EU called the Eiffel Project that was essentially a think tank, organizer of discussions with both EU and US participation. And one of the meetings was at MIT exactly on ICN, just discussing what is essential, what is interesting with ICN. Later on, this technology was embraced by Cisco with efforts in Boston, but then also Paris Lab, and then it moved to the EU side, to Paris. And now they are proposing what is known as hybrid ICN as key technology, and also they're proposing it as an aspect of 5G. Together, both sides of the Atlantic and other people from all around the world, we pushed and essentially established an important conference on information-centric networking under the auspices of ACM-CCOM. And in the first version of it in Paris, we presented with Nikos Fotiou, my collaborator, and a tutorial on ICN privacy and name-based security. So privacy, security, trust are key ideas in the ICN domain. An NDN testbed was developed. It's in general global, but mostly developed and mostly exists in the US. And this will be our chosen testbed for our experiments. And also this technology is moving a little bit out of academia with an NDN consortium starting from the US being established at NIST, the standardization body in the US. So I will just briefly describe what our proposal, what our project is about, but this will not be a deep technical talk. The idea of ICN is that rather than using topology or IP addresses, if you are interested, you ask the network for a content name. The network finds somewhere this item, this content item, and returns it to you. And that way we have various advantages. We have location and topology independence. We have better and automatic support for caching, multicast, and multi-homing with additional measures. We have improved security and privacy and better support for mobility. But a key aspect of ICN in general is how we find content and whether the content that we find is exactly what we asked for, that is content authenticity. So Alice asks for Bob's picture through the network. Somehow maybe it ends up all the way to Bob, or somewhere in the network the picture is found and is returned to Alice. But the question is the following. Alice can see that this is a valid picture, a valid file name, but is it really a picture of Bob, or was something that has intervened in the network and there is a different picture that she has received? So this is a standard problem in networking, and the traditional solution to it is to use a third trusted party that can vouch for the binding between the content name and the content data. And this is usually done through a digital certificate. But our premise and our question, and we have the answer for it, is can we get rid of this trusted third party, and can we enable owners to have self-sovereignty? That is, be in charge of their own content and not rely on third parties to really vouch for them. So our answer is yes, we can. We do it in the context of information-centric networking and for the experiments in NDN, name data networking specifically. And in NDN, one of the features is that content names are human readable. So in this case, we have, or at least our solution, we have to give up human readable names, but we get decentralization and self-sovereignty. So we rely on decentralized identifiers, which is an exciting technology that is being standardized in key fora like the Web3C. And we use them as content names. In general, with DIDs, there is cryptographic material that is associated with the DID and is stored in a DID document. And in our solution, in our approach, we allow DID documents to be stored securely within the content item themselves. So they transport with them all the certification that is needed for their own proof that this is an authentic document. So this way we get self-certification, self-sovereignty, and decentralization. So in this project, we will evaluate the performance and security properties of our scheme, things like time to recover from failures, resilience to network attacks, and measure various performance enhancements like secure content replication, multi-source networking, secure multi-source, and better secure streaming-like services. So we also believe that part of this project will help the EU-US dialogue on NGI security, privacy, trust, decentralization, and self-sovereignty. So our partner is the University of Memphis. From there, the PI is Professor Christos Papadopoulos. I lead the group at AUEB, but with me is also Professor Vasilios Siris, Dr. Nikos Fotiou, Dr. Yannis Thomas, and my PhD student, Iakovos Pitaras. And I'm done for this short presentation, and I hope towards the end of the project to show you results of our experiments and hopefully prove our scheme great.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much. So let's move on with our second speaker and second experiment. Of course, in case you have any questions for them or for the NGI-Atlantic team, feel free to use the chat box. So, Thomas? Yes, Thomas, floor to you.
Thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen. And hopefully that's working right now.
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Yeah, good evening to those in Europe. For those that are dialing in from across the pond, I guess good day to the East Coast and good morning to the West Coast. I'm Tomasz. I'm one of the founders and the managing director as well at Trace Labs. And today I'd like to speak about the importance of privacy of data, especially in the context of supply chain data exchanges, and how can we create greater incentivizations for more trust-based data exchanges. Now, why we believe this is important is because it's at the core. So if we want to achieve a sustainable supply chain in the long term, this will only be possible if we enable all organizations, so either big or small, to create something inclusive and to have all of them benefit from trusted data exchanges. How we are tackling it at Trace Labs is through basically utilizing an ecosystem approach of origin trail. So as you can see, we have kind of three sites or three core values of the origin trail ecosystems, which are important. The first one being neutrality. Neutrality is important, especially from the technological perspective, because only that way we have something open source and neutral. So origin trail here acting really as a middleware layer to enable these trusted data exchanges between different participants in a particular supply chain. And in this way, it acts as does not allow for an aggregation or a single actor really to take over just everything that is happening in a particular supply chain. And then we have the second important value is the inclusiveness. Very similar, or it stems from the neutrality as well, is that supply chains today are quite global and complex. They are not chains, they are networks, and it's impossible for a single organization to really cover everything end to end. So that's why inclusiveness is very important, and we have a partnership hub called Trace Alliance, within which different organizations are really collaborating to make more inclusive initiatives happen. And last but not least, of course, is the usability value, which is represented by Trace Labs. We're really focusing on how to implement business solutions as seamlessly and quickly as possible. And it's also Trace Labs is also a part of basically the NGI-Atlantic initiative. So here's just a slide to give a little bit of a representation of how we think about just the data in terms of almost like a value chain of data. So starting at the data really layer, we have, which is basically a situation today, a lot of fragmented data lakes. A lot of data is being captured, but it's also being kept within closed systems. So with the middleware layer that I was kind of speaking to a little bit with Origin Trail, which already has different open standards for interoperability enshrined in itself. We had the W3C mentioned before from the DID perspective. We're also looking at it from the perspective of the verifiable claims. There's also a lot of other standards that are useful from W3C, obviously. And GS1 as well here as an industrial data standard provider, very useful data standards available and data models available there, such as the PCIS, which is also something that we're engaged with. So ideally, after we move the data from these confined silos towards the Origin Trail layer here, we would get something that's closer to an information. So it would be processed, it would be structured, it would be trusted data, because Origin Trail as a network is based on the blockchain foundation, so it has a consensus layer to keep that integrity. And so by having something that's connected in this way, and it's connected in a graph, we get a semantic, basically decentralized knowledge graph. And this creates a good foundation to be able to create basically the next layer of this pyramid, which is the knowledge, which is taking this information and placing it in a domain where it makes most sense. And here we have a couple of examples from the compliance and certification industry to transport industry, and kind of a lot of different contexts, basically, where we can present this information to make it usable and actionable. And at the very top, we're then coming to the wisdom, which is kind of like a Google for supply chains. And why we like this comparative is because Google utilizes also a very similar technology to map out the kind of World Wide Web. It's the knowledge graph, which is very similar to kind of how Origin Trail is attempting to also map out basically global supply chains, but in a decentralized way. Now, and here is another important point with the decentralized knowledge graph is basically how we're looking, because it's important because of the privacy, right? So what we're seeing here is an example of two organizations which they have both access to what is here kind of prescribed in the white color, which would be representing a public graph. But then each of them has their own separate subgraph, which is their private data, right? So it's an important factor because, especially in enterprise context, a lot of times, as soon as someone is kind of decentralized or distributed ledger technologies are mentioned, the question of a public and fully public data comes to mind. But with an approach like Origin Trail's decentralized knowledge graph, we really can integrate best of both worlds kind of. So you have the privacy of the information that's really kept on your permission, on your private part of the node, whereas some other information might be publicly available to others. And there's even a way to directly give permissions to another organization's one-to-one. So let's say that this part is something that the organization be able to share with the organization B directly, but none of the other participants. So here we're really kind of coming to notions like the public and permission data kind of coexisting within a single knowledge graph, the self-sovereign identity that was already mentioned as well, which is an important piece to kind of how can we really enable the sovereignty when it comes to data and data governance. And then, of course, having the integrity by utilizing the DLT as the foundation. Here's another component that I want to mention because it's important for the NGI-Atlantic as well, and it's called a network operating system. So I'm guessing that's quite a few names at this point, but it's once it's kind of functioning, it's going quite smoothly. Because the NOS is here to really take out a lot of the complexity for anyone utilizing these open source technologies below. And it acts kind of like a connecting piece in between certain data sources and certain data destinations. And it also allows really a pay-per-use model for anyone that's utilizing this technology. And kind of by utilizing the NOS, you're able to tap into all the key value propositions also of Origin Trail. So having that interoperability, having that integrity, and really privacy by design approach to data exchanges. And that really brings us to kind of what our NGI-Atlantic focuses, which is the food data market. And this really revolves around the data marketplace. So why data marketplaces are important in a way is, if I just jump a little bit back, is so the data marketplace can act as a catalyst to kind of like just make more data exchanges happen, because instead of just having something that's processed and structured and trusted data, we can also append a value to it. So we can valorize it, we can give it a price. And as soon as something has that type of value, then a greater incentive exists to just basically have more data be made discoverable. Just on the offset that you are able to create an additional revenue stream by putting this data on a particular data marketplace, especially one that has all the characteristics of interoperability, of integrity, already present in it by design. So jumping back, within the NGI-Atlantic, we will be looking at how to utilize this data marketplace, which has also been developed within a NGI project called NGI Ledger. And we will be looking how to really utilize this technology together with our partners from the US. It's a great company called Coxi. I can't believe I missed the logo here, but they should be here on the left-hand side, because this really depicts their product, which is a very cool, kind of self-sustainable, even solar-powered IoT device, which includes a lot of sensors in it. So it has 5 different sensors: temperature, humidity, it has a rain gauge, it even has image capture capabilities. So it's something that can capture a lot of value, a lot of interesting data, especially if we place it in an interesting part, let's say on a farm. And it would be an interesting data that's also valuable to partners downstream the supply chain. So what we're really aiming here to do is find the best use cases in global supply chains where we can place the different Coxi devices on the fields. And the experiment really being is that we are able to create enough of the revenues by selling this data to cover the costs of having a Coxi device on the field, and then some for whoever partner is that they are really placing this on their premises. So that's really kind of the overarching idea, is how can we capture more data or interesting data, and then have this data marketplace be an incentivization also to create more data exchanges and create more revenues for the upstream partners, but also more value for the downstream partners that can enhance either their just business relations or positioning or communications or trust towards the end consumers. The data marketplace itself is open source as well, so it's a set of smart contracts that are utilizing Origin Trail decentralized knowledge graph. But of course, for easier kind of interactions with either of those two, we've made a NOS full data market interface, which can also be kind of utilized by enterprise users, which find this more convenient. So that's really in essence of the concept of the experiment. So we're looking to find at least 3 global supply chains. We already have quite a few interests, so I'm hoping we'll be able to do more, even within the scope of the NGI-Atlantic, and yeah, showcase that this can be sustainably put on a farm, and that the data can actually be sold. And by doing that, basically we'll make this Coxi device a data marketplace enabled piece of IoT equipment, and just see how much we can really, with the joint offering, enhance market positioning of both partners in this way. Yeah, I think I've covered most of the things. I'm not sure how I'm doing on timing, but I'm happy to take some of the questions if anything has popped up in the meantime.
Great.
Or at the end.
No, very, very timely, yes. Thanks, Tomas.
Thank you.
So, great, thanks. Let's move on to our last speaker, Berat, from Planet Lab Europe, EdgeNet, the laboratory at the Sorbonne Universities. Berat?
Hear me?
No. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Can you see my presentation? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Berat Şenel, and I'm working for Sorbonne University and lead the development of EdgeNet. I'm going to be speaking about the cash experiment on EdgeNet today. The purpose of the experiment will be to trial cash in the real world with real internet users consuming content. So I will start with cash in the next slide. So there's a lot of work done for the potential of blockchain technologies to improve the security, scalability, and economy of distributed data delivery. We desire to figure out the applicability of such technologies in practice by deploying a cutting-edge blockchain-based CDN. Delivery of large chunks of content, such as video, accounts for a significant percentage of all internet traffic. When such content is distributed by large corporations, it takes advantage of CDNs with nodes hosted by ISPs that provide local services to end users. Cash, the CDN technology we are going to test in this experiment, has the potential to change the nature of CDNs by involving end users directly in serving content through the machines they control. The inclusion of users can lead to a wide range of content benefiting from CDNs. So the question here is, why would a user want to be part of this CDN? Cash provides a service for interested users to run cash, and they get incentivized to participate by earning a cryptocurrency called Cashcoin in exchange for serving content to other users. Both cryptographic and economic techniques show that cash users are economically incentivized to serve content honestly. However, another question that comes to mind is whether this is safe. Today, most efforts to build distributed data delivery have focused primarily on data storage or trusted nodes that deliver content. In cash, trust moves from ensuring the nodes that are honest, like in a traditional CDN, to the protocol. The expected impact of the cash experiment will be to push the boundaries more toward low latency and bandwidth, which are quite valuable in the CDN field. The relaxation of trust assumptions in existing platforms will also open up the set of participants somewhat contradictory. If we can show that high performance can be provided by untrusted nodes, this could make even CDNs with trusted nodes have a better security, as they may change their architecture to remove trust assumptions without harming performance. Let's have a look at how cash involves the end users. As you can see in the image, there are 3 nodes running cash toward the cash head node, including the bootstrapper and publisher. This is more like a traditional CDN. There are users out there. Some of them are close to the nodes, and one of them is far away. 2 users then turn in the participants by running cash from machines under their control to serve content to other users. Of course, they gain cash coins in exchange for that. As an outcome, for example, the user away from the nodes becomes closer to the cluster. The question is, how will we test that? And the key enabling technology is the edge cloud. And that edge cloud is EdgeNet in our case. EdgeNet is based on contemporary de facto industry standard technologies, Docker and Kubernetes. We develop custom resources that natively extends the Kubernetes API. In this way, EdgeNet users can make use of EdgeNet resources in the same way as they do for Kubernetes resources without learning another syntax. EdgeNet servers are completely open to the internet, which means that researchers can deploy experimental services to real users, and those services will be subject to real internet conditions. Currently in EdgeNet, there are around 50 nodes in Europe and North America. More importantly, EdgeNet makes that easy for users to contribute a node to the cluster. Thanks to that, EdgeNet can provide more and more vantage points by the day. Another important feature is EdgeNet ensures the isolation between user and user groups by its multi-provider and multi-tenant structure. As you see on the left side, a contributor, a node contributor, may be an individual user, maybe a research institution or else. And a contributor can make the node either schedulable or unschedulable as they desire. So those nodes are used by EdgeNet users. The multi-tenancy feature of EdgeNet ensures the privacy between the user groups by allocating a namespace per user group, which may be, again, a research institution, a lab, or any kind of research group. Regarding transparency aspect, we plan to enable an auditing service running on port 80 on every node in EdgeNet, which will be accessible publicly. So, as the last word, I want to talk about the team behind this experiment. Timur Friedman is the director of Plan Lab Europe, providing the test bed with Olivier Fourmont from Sorbonne University, Justin Kapos from NYU Tandon School, providing cache to be tested, and Rick McGeer from US Ignites brings the EdgeNet technology, which he led the way. So thank you for your attention. I am open for the questions.
Thank you, Berat. Thank you very much. Thank you, all our successful applicants and winners of this first open call. So just to conclude, if we manage to entice a little bit the interest of you and your colleagues working with you and different NGI technologies, as said, the second call will close in a couple of days, but we have 3 more to come. So from December this year up to September next year, we will have 3 other calls. So start thinking about your teams and the network you have, and find out US colleagues that can join effort with you to apply for one of the upcoming calls. We've just shown you some of the examples of things that can be done in many different fields of applications and relying on different platforms and different, very, very different technologies. The teams that are going to be followed for the next calls won't differ too much from this, so you might rely on the successful experiments to build up your proposals. I don't know if, Jim, you want to say just any final words, or I think we can thank everybody and thank the NGI.
I would just like to thank our speakers as well, and also to the NGI policy support team, the policy summit team, I should say. Thank you for everything you've done for us.
Yeah. And of course, feel free to get in touch with us via our social media channels or the NGIAtlantic.eu website, even if you want to get in touch with our with the companies and the universities that presented today, so the free consortia or even the others that you can find in the list of the winners of our first call. So I think we have reached our time. Thank you for being with us until now, for those who are in Europe especially, and thanks to our European, our colleagues participating from the US.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.